Cheers, everybody. Thank you for tuning in. First of all, I'd like to thank all of my new subscribers of today. You truly made my day by subscribing to my channel. This is a very big encouragement for me to continue sharing what I have discovered along the course of my journey, surviving adversity, and in the activity of my practice as a forensic and consulting hypnotist with collaborations with the medical field. So before we get going, I'd like to remind everybody that this channel is not to be considered in place of medical advice. Of course not. It's not either a thesis to be submitted for funding for research. This channel is truly and solely designed to give you self-help tips to survive the hits based on my own personal experience and the experience of all those who I've helped on their path. I remind everybody of this underneath every single video. So, do look under the video of the descriptions. This is never to replace your medical advice, and it's not either a research academic document to be submitted for funding. This is simply a day-to-day help on your journey as I am able to provide it. And I also include underneath the videos the reviews and comments of those who have worked with me, because they're very authentic and genuine. I can't even access those, so they'll help all of you understand the realm of my work. So today I would like to continue on the questions that have been asked to me after my last video this week about peritraumatic dissociation. What is dissociation? How do we recognize it? And how we can provide immediate tips to secure your wellness as rapidly as possible. So this is a medical condition that is related to trauma. So of course this has to be brought up with your medical team. If you believe that you are experiencing symptoms of the dissociative state, if you believe you're going through peritraumatic dissociation, as soon as you can, it's very important to talk to this about your licensed medical provider, your doctor, your mental health, and especially a trauma therapeutic center, trauma therapy center. If you can have access to one of those, they will absolutely orient you in the right direction. So here is my own take on peritraumatic dissociation. Dissociation is the normal response from our central nervous system when we are faced with intense physical harm, threat, or terror that we are unable to escape, avoid, or shield ourselves from. In a state of dissociation, we undergo a partial or complete disruption of the normal integration of our conscious, mental, and emotional functioning. We can no longer feel physical pain. We can no longer access our emotions, our physical body sensations, and we can not easily, if not at all, communicate with others around us. Dissociation is actually a natural response that we share with all living beings. In the wild, if you notice a hunt, a chase, when a predator is pursuing a prey, during the length of the chase, the prey will be immensely immersed in the body, in the survival instinct to save its life, in the escape. And so you will find that animal completely immersed in that effort of the physical realm to save its life. However, the moment that the predator's jaw will close upon the throat of the prey, you will often find the prey's body going instantly limp, loose, relaxed, and comfortable. The prey is not dead at that moment. This is simply the mind, the spirit, the life force, so to speak, disconnecting from the physical body to shield itself, to disengage from a level of physical, mental, and emotional harm, the intensity of which will be impossible for us to absorb and respond to. So with a bit of understanding, awareness, and education, you can learn to recognize a dissociative state in yourself and, of course, in others as well, as both wildlife, animals, and human beings, all of us. When we're in a dissociative state, you will recognize that characteristic dazed far away, glassy, disconnected stare that we get through our eyes when our lives, our physical safety, and our emotional well-being, or all of the above, have been suddenly, violently altered. Experiencing peritraumatic dissociation early on in life, especially when that state is endured repetitively, I would say it permanently stretches the boundaries between the conscious and subconscious part of the mind. It's a bit like a journey back and forth between the conscious state and the subconscious dissociative state. And when we experience this early on in life, as I did, it can, and very often does, establishes an instinctive pattern, a habit, to retreat to that state of dissociation whenever our comfort, safety, or security are being jeopardized. So that establishes a pattern that becomes later on very resistant to change. Whenever a difficult situation is encountered, we can take the habit of dissociating into that level of out of body, so to speak, experience. So I'm going to talk a little bit about how this happened to me and why this happened to me, so you can understand, you can have at least an example of the disconnected, dissociated state. And then we'll talk about the symptoms, and we'll also talk, I will give you actually 5 tips to help yourself or help another when you notice you are experiencing, or another in front of you is experiencing that state. So how it happened to me is basically when I was a very little girl, very small person, in my very early life, I had to experience that state, unfortunately, when I was beaten violently and repetitively. And so as a child, if you're cornered by an adult, especially an adult that is supposed to be your protector, your caretaker, the ones who are supposed to teach you safety and protection and well-being. When as a child you are attacked by those that are supposed to protect you, and especially a young child being attacked by adults, of course you are in the extreme vulnerability position. Back in those days, we didn't even have social services or access to guidance or counseling. So basically, when your caretakers were attacking you at that moment in time, there's nothing you could do. It's a bit like a prey being attacked by a predator. When all of the resources have been removed, there's nothing you can do. All I could do at that time, being very small, a child, was to basically wrap myself in a tight little bubble to protect my skull, and as best as possible from the shoes and the fists and the punches and the hits and the slaps and all of that. And when you reach that moment where you can no longer do anything to protect yourself and you're cornered, that's when very often the dissociative state will happen. You see that in victims of accidents also sometimes, who walk around with extreme injuries without even noticing them. That's a state of shock and a state of dissociation. So we know that as emergency medicine first responders. And so in that state, it is absolutely extraordinary in a way to experience, even though I certainly don't wish it on anyone, because this means you're actually in the space very often between life and death, in that space in between. Very often in that space, everything starts to come to your awareness in slow motion. And what happens is suddenly you no longer feel anything. You no longer feel the hits, the blows, the pain, the physical sensations have gone completely. Not only that, but you no longer feel any sort of emotions. It sorts of feels like slipping off your body and watching the situation, watching the scene from above, totally free of emotions, of judgments, physical sensations of all kinds. So I would think it compares to how you feel when you're back in the realm of the spirit. For those of us who believe in surviving the passage from the body, because we know that we're not our body. I keep saying that we're not our brain. Our brain is our operating system, our operating software. Our body is our vehicle. And we change bodies constantly through the course of our lives. So I certainly don't believe that once the body dies, that there we go, we poof into thin air. I believe we are a life energy. Everybody has their own beliefs. I work with people of all faith and all cultural backgrounds and all education and all stories, and there is never any judgment. We all have our own conceptions, but I would think that it compares to being free of the human body, because that's what it feels like. You're observing the situation from above, totally freed of any form of emotion and physical sensations. There's no judgment either in that state. So you're looking at a scene where very often you're being attacked, and you're just a silent observer. You're no longer truly yourself. You're just basically life that lifted off your body and is observing the scene. So the consequences of that state is you're not feeling emotions. Obviously, you're not expressing emotions. You're no longer either able to protect yourself, but again, you slip into that state when you run out of options, typically, at least initially when you begin to experience that state. So you're not able to communicate most of the time with others. It takes extraordinary training to be able to communicate from a dissociative state most of the time. And the state of dissociation is known to be experienced differently by different people and regarding different causes, of course. So I'm only sharing here my experience and the experience that I've noticed and spoke about with others. So you are lifted off from all sensations and you're observing the scene completely free of any and all emotions. It's pretty extraordinary. And what you cannot do is express yourself, express emotions, and take action. You're basically frozen. Your body is frozen in a way. And so in that state, once you are in a state of dissociation, it can be very difficult and challenging to reconnect to your body. You can stay in a state of dissociation, disconnected, dissociative state for quite a long time. And it varies, but I often notice that when I happen to be back with the abusers of the past, I tend to stay in that dissociative state as an instinctive, I would say, protective mechanism through most of the time that I'm with them. So it can last for a very long time, and that's when it's very subtle, but that's when somebody will ask you what you want to do and you have absolutely no idea because you're disconnected from your own identity at that moment. And so in that state, as a little girl, going back to this story, I was accused by those who were beating me to be a monster because I was not crying while I was being beaten. And my life energy, my life, my soul, my being, my spirit was, of course, you hear everything in that state. You are completely conscious of what's happening. You're watching it like a movie, basically, a 3D movie happening all around you. So you hear the comment and you have no judgment, so you receive them. And as a child, we tend to take as truth what we are being taught, especially by those of authority that we are taught to listen to and obey. So I was being taught and told and accused of being a monster because I couldn't cry. I was called, back in those days, I'm going to age myself, the British Prime Minister was Margaret Thatcher, and she was called the Iron Lady because she was so strong and resilient and fierce, I suppose. I was a child at that time, but I suppose that's why she was called the Iron Lady. And so I was beginning to be called the Iron Lady by those who were harming me because I couldn't cry while I was being attacked. And they would look at me and scream at me and say, look what a monster you are. You're not even crying when you're being beaten. You have no heart. You have a heart of steel. You're a monster. And I believed those things. It took a lifetime for my colleagues and myself and enormous work to begin to realize that it was not me, the monster, that little girl who was trying so hard to be loved and trying so hard to fit in and belong and please those who were never satisfied with her being in their life, basically. So you are not able to express emotions. That has nothing to do with not having a heart or being a monster. It simply has to do with a state of dissociation. Dissociation, peritraumatic dissociation is the clinical term that is given for dissociation at the time of trauma. Okay, so I'm going to move on now to the symptoms. If you believe you're experiencing episodes of dissociations, you should seek help with licensed medical providers, with licensed trauma therapists in a trauma center. Talk to your doctor. This is not to be taken lightly, because while peritraumatic dissociation provides a temporary relief in cases of extreme trauma, in the long term it's associated with decreased functioning of your mind, decreased adjustment, and of course it is known to produce lasting chronic post-traumatic stress in those who have experienced this early in life. And the symptoms and the sequela to the peritraumatic dissociation are known to include depersonalization. That's when you become detached, and a detached observer of yourself. You don't feel present in your body anymore. It also includes mental emotional numbing, the disconnection from your emotions, and those are all part of the avoidance cluster of post-traumatic stress symptoms. Disengagement, sometimes amnesia, that's very common with severe trauma. Somatization, so that's very interesting. In Eastern medicine we study and we've known for the centuries of Eastern medicine that the Chinese Eastern approach believes that trauma received by the body will be blocked at an energetical level and eventually translated into dis-ease that can be physiological conditions or mental or emotional conditions. So somatization is the expression by the body of the pain that were received on an emotional and psychological level, mental level. And as well as anxiety, PTSD, low self-esteem, obviously, chronic pain. A lot of time with trauma survivors, we see that IBS, arthritis, interpersonal dysfunction, obviously, right? If you are attacked by those who are supposed to protect you, how can you be expected to trust others, right? So you're going to very likely develop later on interpersonal dysfunction. Sometimes people turn to substance abuse, self-mutilation, very often suicidal ideation, and sometimes action. This is a normal consequence of early life trauma. We all know that these days. So 5 tips today, 5 tips. And again, self-care tips. These are not to replace your medical advice, and this is not a thesis to be submitted for clinical research, all right? These are just my observation as a survivor of extreme trauma and as someone who's helping others and a lot of medical providers to help with the symptoms of their patients that are resistant to change, working with brain plasticity and brain rewiring. So the 5 tips. Back to the 5 tips to protect yourself or another in a state of dissociation. Number 1, exactly the same as when we're responding to a scene as an emergency medicine first responder, which I happen to be. Number 1, remove the danger, remove the abuse, remove the abuser, remove the threat, remove the trigger, remove the cause. If we're not removing the cause, then we can't expect for the dissociative state to resume. So in a state of like this, the first step has to be to identify and remove the trigger. And then, of course, take the person you are helping to a safe place. Relocating, removing triggers. Oftentimes, you can help by providing a soothing environment, no bright lights, no overstimulation, noise or sounds. Many trauma survivors, including myself, become extremely sensitive to sound. And I work with students on the autism spectrum, and I'm smiling because they are brilliant, as any of you who's worked with the autism spectrum will likely know. And working with them, I've asked them, we've compared our sound sensitivity, and incredibly, even though it's known that people on the autism spectrum will be sensitive to sound, I am much more sensitive to sound as a trauma survivor than those with autism that I work with. So it's known that trauma survivors often develop an a severe sensitivity to sound. So if you're helping someone in a dissociative state, make sure that the sounds around them become soothing and not aggressive. And so taking the person to a safe place. And then your second step that is very helpful is to ground yourself or ground that person you're helping. That will often include removing your shoes and paying conscious attention to the way that the ground feels underneath your toes, underneath the soles of your feet, feeling the energy of the earth, breathing deeply, wiggling your toes, bringing your energy back down into your body and connecting with the earth, with the ground, which is the source of our life on this planet, right? So that's very important. Belly breathing, focusing, and again, we've talked about that on my film about calming the central nervous system after trauma. So noticing the details around you. If you can take yourself or that person in nature, then it becomes a magnificent support. We've seen that in my film on forest medicine. The presence of nature around us is extremely helpful, known to alleviate depression, anxiety, stress, to calm the central nervous system. You're breathing in phyton seed from the cypress trees around you, which immediately change your brain chemistry. So nature, extremely beneficial if you have access to that. The ocean as well, negative ions in the air will help make a huge, immediate, rapid and lasting difference. Gentle movement will help as well. So if you're, again, walking in nature, you can combine all of these, grounding yourself, touching, noticing the bark, the strong bark of the trees, noticing the scents around you, the sound of the water, possibly with rivers, noticing. So if you are, if you can be, for instance, doing a gentle activity like gardening, that might help too, focusing on small, easy tasks. Next, your third step will be to provide sensory comfort. So that's, again, safety, warmth, reassuring sensory awareness, maybe a soft, heavy blanket wrapped around you, maybe a cool pillow that feels amazing against your cheek, a sweater, an embrace. So now physical touch only if it is okay. Obviously, if the abuser tried to hug the person that they've just put and placed in a state of dissociative shock, it might be very much counteractive. Again, removing first the danger. And then if touch is okay, providing a deep, reassuring embrace, gentle pressure, soothing warmth, gentleness, comforting, reassuring presence might very well get the person back into the physical awareness of their body. That could be deep massage, if it's okay, once again. Stimulating the sense is also part of providing sensory comfort. The touch, if you're in nature, the rough bark, or maybe a rough or a soft stone. I was recently in British Columbia with the people of the First Nation, and they had me hold a pellet and a stone from their island, so incredibly soft it felt almost surreal. These sensations are helpful. What you can also do is place a single drop of essential oil on the inside of your wrist and gently inhale. So in those, I would suggest Helichrysum, which one of my students used to call Holy Krishna. It always made me smile. I love that transference of her mind. Helichrysum is known for helping with trauma. Jasmine is a euphoric and helps soothe. Lavender, of course, known to help relieve past trauma and calm the mind. Peppermint, a bit of an awakening call. Taking the scent of an orange if you don't have an essential oil available. And if you do, please make sure they're organic, so there is no chemical products that can create reactions there. If you do not, just simply taking fruits, a cut of an orange or lemon, chewing on some mandarin with all the juices there, or if you have nothing better, maybe a flavored gum. Rubbing, maybe exfoliating lotions on your palms, on your feet, soothing music, soothing sounds, and feeling maybe a splash of water on your face. All of that is part of helping with sensory awareness. And So number 4 will be self-love and self-care, and that's the whole purpose of this channel, is to help you develop self-love and self-care in the face of adversity, accepting that state. That's what we were talking about this week with at the trauma center, where I collaborate and research with trauma specialists there, accepting that this is a normal response to abnormal situations, that you are not at fault. This is not your fault. You're doing the very best that you can to cope with difficult situations, and you are surviving. So giving yourself that credit. Affirmations can help as anchors, repeating to yourself, I am a survivor, I am strong, and I am safe. And if you are safe, of course, if you're not, making sure that you are taking the proper steps to enhance your safety. And in the self-love, self-care category, I will include not relying, not expecting those who are not able to help you because they simply do not have the understanding, the capacity, the awareness, or the willingness to help. Stopping to rely on these to help you, and turning towards those who are helpful and beneficial, those who do not trigger you, those who nurture you, those who educate and help you and support you. And number 5, your last one, and I'm going to emphasize on this one again, is to seek professional help. Peritraumatic dissociation is a clinical condition that requires clinical support. Talk to your doctor, talk to your licensed medical providers, and let them know what you are experiencing. And then with your medical team around you, you can turn to others like myself to help rebuild your self-esteem, your sense of self-worth, to help release the wounds of the past and turn yourself towards a better future where you finally realize that you are a survivor, you are a thriver, that you are so strong for having survived all that you have survived, and there is no shame in being a survivor. None whatsoever. This makes us stronger than we would have ever been before. And learning to release the past emotions, because as my friends from the First Nations taught me, those who harm you are in states of distress. And if we simply ask for what we believe in to help save their souls, then we no longer have to carry that. So I leave you with these words. Thank you for tuning in, everyone. Again, thank you so much for those who joined in today and supported my channel by subscribing. You made my day. I am so grateful to be able to share my message with each and every one of you. So if you haven't done so, do subscribe. There's a red button underneath your screen, and that's a way for you to join our community. We're simply here to support and inspire one another. Until then, see you next time, everybody, and cheers